Alright everybody, today we're going to be talking about a content creator that piqued my interest a couple months ago when I stumbled across her channel, and I found myself really enjoying her content, but feeling something bothersome at the back of my skull, just kind of scratching, you know, something that told me to keep an eye out for sus shit. This YouTuber is actually more of a TikToker. She's bigger on TikTok and Instagram, but she has a substantial 250,000 subscriber YouTube presence. She goes by the Dadvocate. Her real name is Lauren. I don't know her last name. I'm not a weirdo. And she makes content, at least from my understanding, she started off primarily making content centered around being anti-partner shaming. You see, she mostly operates on TikTok. And on TikTok, I think we can all agree, there are some pretty god-awful trends that have become popular with the largely female demographic on the platform. Don't get me wrong, the cringe incel, like black and white, weightlifting, she left me, but now she's gonna regret it when I'm 250 pounds of muscle, like TikToks, those are cringe and all, but they don't really get much traction. They're not very popular. They're kind of a meme even on TikTok. I'm talking about the girls that are, like, posting videos of themselves talking their husbands or boyfriends for, like, mundane stuff to the entire internet. The posts go viral, and then, like, a bunch of people start, like, commenting on the boyfriend and, like, a really... It's a really bad trend of partner shaming. It's become quite popular on TikTok, right? She started off debunking stuff like that. And then, of course, there's also the trend of misandrist women on TikTok sort of coming together to talk about how much they hate men. And if you guys aren't familiar with, like, how awful it can get, I'm talking, like, women making posts about how, with an insane amount of positive response, about how, like, it'll be like a post with 250,000 likes with a girl talking about how she gave an ugly guy a chance, and this is why you shouldn't ever give ugly guys chances. And she goes on to tell a story about how he was 5 minutes late to a date, and she follows the rule of no matter what, you are never, ever late for a date. And so she ditched him and then, like, posted his info online in that, like, post, which she ended up getting harassed for. And then she defended it and got, like, called a queen for it. Like, that kind of shit. TikTok politics is an actual war zone, a scorched earth war zone? Yes. Some of the worst people ever, with the worst positions ever, be posting on there, okay? And I think it's no secret that right now, you know, if you look at the data and everything, men, Gen Z men, are in a weird place right now. Notably very socially isolated, and with very few friends. And the thing that has gotten the most headlines, though I honestly think is the least important of the issue, but is still, you know, relatively important, is there has been an extreme rise in the rate of virginity for men from like 18 to 25, 30 years old. Just a massive rise in the virginity rate for Gen Z, like my generation. And then even if you aren't even accounting for virginity and you're accounting for being in relationships or having been in any form of long-term serious relationship, the numbers are astoundingly low for both, for like men, women, non-binary people. Like, actually, no, I think the only demographic that's not really seeing as much turmoil in relationships are actually the gays. The gays are pretty much fine. But we're talking about the straights here mostly. Not saying the gays don't have problems when it comes to dating, but the straights are the ones who are becoming incels and shooting up schools. Let's be real here. That aside, the fact that guys in Gen Z are in this position, I can attribute to a couple of things. I think a lot of it is fed by propaganda. I think that a lot of Gen Z dudes have sort of, as a default cultural position, fallen under the belief that, like, women are a sort of threat to them. Whether it be in the form of, like, feminism being this, like, intimidating, scary thing, or women being more of, like, a sexual threat, if that makes sense. I think a lot of guys are sort of, by default, under the impression that women are a sort of threat to them, in a way. Not a physical threat, but a threat against their egos, a threat against their masculinity. And most of these things are completely imagined and made up, but they are convinced of this. And I'm talking about, like, teenage boys, right? I'm not even talking about people who are, you know, super, like, propagandized to or anything like that. I'm not even getting that deep. It's not an uncommon thought process among a lot of young guys. And then on top of that, you've got a lot of culture online right now, particularly on TikTok, being centered around women shit-talking men. And I know it seems like, if you're a guy, like, oh, well, if you're a guy and you see, like, a horrible lady on TikTok talking about how if she had a boyfriend, she'd smash his PS5, why do you care? You're not dating her. Hell, you would never want to date her, right? But when you see that kind of stuff, well, I'd say I'm more immune to the propaganda than most, but when most guys see that kind of stuff, it really has a tendency to paint a negative association with women in your mind. I'll give an example of a friend I spoke to recently, and while I don't fully agree with what he said, I see where he's coming from, and I can agree with it in a sense. I asked him why he thought there was such a rapid rising in the rate of loneliness and virginity in Gen Z men in our age demographic. And he told me, honestly, dude, I just think most women are predators. I've heard a response not too dissimilar from many other people in this age demographic. And to be honest with you guys, can you blame a lot of Gen Z dudes? I know better than to allow my experiences with a few people end up painting my perspective of an entire group, but think about it like this. When a woman gets raped by a man and is afraid of men, while we recognize that's probably not healthy and maybe shouldn't be encouraged, we can empathize with it, right? If a woman's been assaulted or raped by a man, we can understand why there would be some sort of lingering emotion and distrust and fear around men. Just all men. It doesn't matter. It could be father, boyfriend, anything. It's just, there's trauma there, right? I'm just going to use myself as an example, okay? Think about the 2 relationships I've been in my entire adult life. One of them wasn't even really a relationship. It was the whole, like, sex cult thing. And the other thing was my only ever actual real relationship I've had in my life, which was with Lonnie, who was an abuser. Who financially abused, stole, lied. Like, I could go on. Like, lied to me about her age. She was, like, 10 years older than me and lied and said she was only, like, 7 years older than me, which would never have been a problem with me in the first place, like the age gap, but she lied to me about it for some reason. She was actually, like, I think 31 when I broke up with her. I was under the impression she was, like, 28 or 29. Like, I don't know why she'd lie about it. Like, literally no reason she'd lie about it, but it's really weird she did for years of us being together. I found out about it from her arrest report when she got arrested. But yeah, I think you guys can kind of understand where I'm coming from here, right? Like, I know better than to allow that to paint my view of women, but, like, do you really think that that type of experience is that rare? Think about how many shitty fucking guys there are that abuse their girlfriends, manipulate, extort, pressure, put down, control. Think about how common that is. Do you really think that's a male-exclusive thing? Do you think that's a thing that men are doing that much more than women are? Or do you think maybe women do it at a relatively similar rate because we're all humans? Only women are socialized to do abuse differently. And we're socialized to look at men who have been abused by women differently. I think a lot of guys in Gen Z have been in pretty bad relationships with women. And right now, they're the only voices they have to listen to in their rebound period. Because let's be honest, when you're going through a breakup or a bad experience with a relationship, you're looking for something to sort of... A lot of people look for, like, advice or content online to help them get through it. And right now, it's red pill incel shit. That is the primary, thing that those people are going to be funneled into, especially divorced men. Divorced men are very vulnerable to this type of like, radicalization. They are the prime target demographic besides young, angsty teenage boys that are going through puberty. Which is why, when I discovered Lauren, aka the Dadvocate, I was actually pretty excited because nothing on its face came off as all that bad. Here, in fact, here's an example of a video from her. It's called Womansplaining Men to Women Compilation 55 through 59. This is a compilation of TikTok she uploads and puts on her channel. I think this series is pretty funny. The idea behind it is that she's speaking to her female audience, presumably, and explaining to them certain male behaviors. So let's watch it.
Telling my husband everything we need to do before people can. Him shoveling dirt off the road.
What are you doing?
Cooking a blizzard.
I cooked you crab mac and cheese with peas with garlic bread.
Oh.
This is an absolute dick move from the husband here. What a dick move here. She defends him, by the way, but this is actually one of the videos that I think is better to pick apart. This is one of the videos that stood out to me as a little sussy.
Spent like 2 hours cooking. What did...
It's a little bougie.
You'll see, chat.
Just really buzzy.
Just like
That's disgusting. What the heck?
Busy's done.
This right here is exactly what people mean when they say that women hate how little it takes to make men happy. What's so hilarious is that it is so easy to please this man that she could have the easiest life in the world just slinging glizzies. But instead, she's going to be eternally frustrated by the fact that this man will never give a single solitary shit about how pleated the quilts are. This is the type of man who...
So, when I watched this video for the first time, most of her videos don't have anything that stands out to me like this, but this video is what made me start to feel sus about her. This guy is an asshole. I'm sorry, but that wife didn't just make dinner for her husband and herself. Like, they have kids. You can hear the kids in the background. Do you think the kids just want to eat an exploded microwave hot dog for dinner? She made a big, like, macaroni casserole thing with the crispy top, made a whole ass fucking dinner, and he, in front of her, makes some half-assed, thrown-together snack. For no other... Like, the only reason you would do that in front of her is to make her feel bad, and like her work was for nothing. And what really stood out to me is that her response is to not only defend the guy for that, and no plate on the microwave, by the way, it's, like, comical. And, like, he's a complete slob. She's gonna have to clean up that microwave tray, by the way. Guarantee the wife cleans up the microwave. And not only that, by the way, but she's defending the guy and talking about how easy women hate how little men need. She could just sit back and relax, and she'd have such an easy life. All of her troubles are self-imposed. You can hear the kids in the background. She made dinner for the family, and his response, instead of eating the dinner she made for herself, the kids, and him, is to microwave an exploded hot dog with no plate and like, eat it in front. That is the most... I hope it's fake. It's probably fake, but even if it's not, the fact that she, like, defends him, it stood out to me as really sus. I was binge watching her content and honestly really enjoying it for a while, but there was just stuff like this that felt off to me, you know? It felt weird. It felt weird. Yeah, it looks fake. It looks like it could be a skit, for sure. It does look like it could be a skit, but we're more focused on Dadvocate's response to it. She thinks it's real. Now, this is less of, like, a thing that I have to complain about, to be honest. Like, I really don't take much of an issue with her here. And to be clear, she very openly claims not to be a red pillar. I have heard her shit talk Andrew Tate. I have heard her shit talk Just Pearly things. I have heard her shit talk the red pill. She claims she is not a red pill person. And fair enough. But people can lie about their political positions. So I still kept an eye out because, let's be honest, there is a massive market for pick-me women to make content dedicated to appeasing the held opinions and preconceived notions of bitter men. Those men love hearing those opinions regurgitated by a woman, validated by a woman. They love it. They love it so much. It's one of their favorite things. Here's the thing, though. Nothing else really stood out to me until a couple days ago. I'm grinding gold while running circles around Elwyn Forest on WoW Classic Hardcore because I don't want to die, so I'm just making sure to stay in Elwyn. And this video comes up in my recommended, and you better believe it caught my eye. From the Dadvocate, Destiny gets schooled by the Dadvocate, Abba Atlas, and the lead attorney. Apparently, Destiny and her had drama about 5 months ago, and I never saw this shit go down. Now, we're not going to watch her whole video she made, but we'll watch a small portion of it, so you can get an idea of what she's talking about and responding to, and we'll get a look at the disagreement that went down.
I know YouTube is a little bit more liberal than TikTok when it comes to, like, what words you're allowed to say. And because I said the R word, there's so many R words. That's what's so annoying about me referencing it. But my live got shut down so fast for saying the word that Destiny called me, like, 7 times on his stream. And, like, I'm pretty sure Destiny didn't lose no monetization or anything. You know, it's just not great practice to go throwing that word around regardless. More like, regardless. What are we doing here today, people? Who is Destiny? What are we reacting to? Why is he calling me names? So Destiny, this guy with the blue hair here, you may have heard of him before. He is a pretty popular YouTuber, actually 672,000 subscribers. So Destiny is a pretty big content creator and streamer. From what I understand, he is formerly libertarian, now just considers himself left. He has very different views than me when it comes to father's rights, family court, which has led to him reacting to one of my videos.
Now, I'm going to throw this out here now. Something that this woman has a tendency to do is frame her videos as though she's making them for women. Like, her audience is majority women. Like, it's women-splaining men to women is, like, her biggest ongoing series. She really makes it seem like she's talking to an audience of women, and like she's supposed to have an audience of women. But when you look at the comments, it is nothing but divorced middle-aged men. It is nothing but divorced middle-aged men. Not only that, but the companies that sponsor her know that women don't watch her content, because she's sponsored by nothing but men's care products that have her in the script they write her for selling the product to her audience, make misogynistic, like, half jokes about how women spend so much money on their products, but we guys, guys are just need the good stuff. They just spend a few dollars and we're all good, get this stuff. Like, it's very clear that even the advertisers that reach out to her for sponsorships know that it's just dudes watching her, which is why it also feels a little disingenuous and felt iffy to me that she continued to frame it as though she had this audience of women she was speaking to, when it's 99% dudes, and she knows it. Not really the biggest nitpick, but it becomes relevant later. Let's continue watching.
Video that Destiny is responding to of mine, debunking the dads get custody when they ask for it. This is like a big talking point for Destiny, and he regularly uses the argument of, well, if men just asked for custody, then they would get it. And so, of course, he was tagged in this by someone.
Nobody said they simply ask. Why would you take such a bad faith?
Okay, I will say, in response to this video, a lot of people were saying that it was, I was making...
So for a little background, Lauren, or the Dadvocate, was responding to a TikTok by someone named X-Patriarch, who's like a TikTok male feminist lefty creator. She was responding to him, and he was responding to her statements on father's rights in family courts. Destiny was responding to her response to his response to her. And he was, like, very mean and everything, because, it's Destiny. And now she's responding to him. It is a back-and-forth cycle of responses here, to be clear. There is a lot getting cut out. Just so much getting cut out. So, I watched this video. And when I finished it, I watched Destiny's video as well, because she cuts out a fair amount of Destiny's video, she cuts out a fair amount of her own original video, and she certainly barely shows any of the X-Patriarch video that she was responding to. In fact, her original response is pretty heavily cut. And I thought, you know what? Her arguments don't feel very strong here. Her arguments feel very weak. I'm going to go ahead and look at the original video and from X-Patriarch that she was responding to in the first place and just watch it on its own. It was a response to her, and oh my god, is it the most thorough, concise, and destructive response I've ever seen. I must say, like, this was the sus that I was keeping an eye out for. There's a reason why she was cutting up this video in the way that she was, I feel, because this guy made some pretty solid arguments, and she left a lot of them out of her response in the editing. Let's watch his response to her.
It sure is interesting how one small group of people can take one small survey done in one small county, manipulate the ever-living shit out of those numbers, and then propagate one of the biggest lies about fathers and family court I have ever heard.
The Dadvocate here is responding to one of my videos on child custody on her YouTube channel, taking issue with the idea that men who seek custody typically get it, and in particular with the Massachusetts study on gender bias, which said that 70% of those men who seek custody obtain custody. Now, Lauren's was the first account I ever blocked on TikTok, long before I ever started making videos on these topics, but I take her concerns about misinformation and—
This is the bit that really stood out to me. I started reading the comments as listening to the video at this point, and it was just waves of women commenting about how they, like, found her content, thought she was being reasonable at first, but very quickly started to get pick-me vibes. Or girls talking about how they'd found their boyfriends watching it and had to explain that she's just some, like, pick-me and internalized misogyny creator that's just grifting off of their desire to be validated. So much of her content, once I realized what her game is just meant to make guys feel great about being guys, but in the most disingenuous way possible. It's not this uplifting self-help thing. It's not this I'm a voice for men in a time where men are feeling really ostracized and unsocialized and booted out by society. It's taking advantage of that fact and trying to sort of create a tribalism that men have started to build online and in their communities. I assume you've seen this sort of culture building, this like almost battle of the sexes, you could almost call it, within Gen Z. The whole like dudes rock and women are just going to clubs and partying and on their phones and having sex with guys and trying to like get clothes while dudes are out there having fun and making cool shit. Dudes are awesome. Dudes are cool. Dudes are like, oh yeah, dudes just get along. Boys rule. Like literally boys rule, girls drool shit, but for 22-year-old adults on the internet, right? But it's like this idea that like dudes are these like hyper simple, nice, understandable, reasonable creatures that women just can't understand how simple and non-complex men are. Women just think of things too complexly and they're too neurotic to deal with how men are just so simple. Like one example she gave, and to be fair, this one's kind of real, is but she exaggerates it, is the thing that guys, I don't even think this is a guy thing. This is just a thing that people do, is just kind of phasing out. You ever just be sitting there and all of a sudden you're just like, you just have to like snap out of it? That ever happened to you before? She tried to claim this is a dude thing. And that like, it's just a dude thing. He's in Nirvana right now. Don't interrupt him. This is a dude thing. He's currently experiencing pure ecstasy. He has gone into a non-voluntary state of meditation. Aren't dudes awesome? That's called ADHD. Yeah, honestly. Like, it's really weird. It's this weird, like, worshipping of, like, the bromance, this, like, mysticized simplicity and coolness of dudes, you know? It's hard to put into words, but it's something that she kind of just tries to feed into to make the guys who watch her content feel validated, you know? Hard to explain. Anyway, let's continue to watch the video.
And accurately reporting the facts as genuine, and so I'll unblock her and tag her in this, which will be my most comprehensive video on father bias in family courts that I've ever done. And let's start out by correcting this.
You have zero stake in this game as a 40-year-old childless man, and yet here you are trying to be the hero of it by spreading lies about other men.
Now, a quick scroll through my content shows that I'm not
the man
childless.
defender.
I share 50-50 custody of our son, a teenager who is on the spectrum. Now, as for my stake in this, Lauren herself admits that men are actively discouraged from seeking custody, and so I think it's on all of us to accurately report what kind of biases do exist in family court, as well as encouraging men to be involved fathers, not just at the time of separation, but when the child is born, and also afterwards when they get custody, in order to overturn the absolutely horrific rates of father abandonment. Now, Lauren has only a single source to dispute the Massachusetts gender bias study, which she presents as a paper written by Mark Rosenthal, except that it's...
Now, The funny thing about this, guys, is in her response to this video, she cuts out this segment. And when responding to him about how him saying that she has no real data to back up her claim, she then responds to this video with this same image. She cuts out this section where he debunks this image and then responds to his video with the same image he debunks. The same editorial that he debunks, she responds to an edited version of this video with as her evidence. Let me rewind it a bit.
To dispute the Massachusetts gender bias study, which she presents as a...
This was the benefit of watching these videos, like, in backwards order, starting with the last of the response videos, then working my way to the original. I was able to realize, in a way that I don't think most watching in sequential order would have been able to, that, wait a second, that link she used as her source in her response to this guy is the one he's debunking here. This wasn't even included in her response to him. She cut this out.
A paper written by Mark Rosenthal, except that it's not a paper, it's an article that Rosenthal wrote on his own website. Rosenthal is also not a researcher, but a software engineer like myself, and he was a speaker at the International Conference on Men's Issues in 2019. And that conference is run by a Voice for Men, an anti-feminist group the Southern Poverty Law Center has declared a hate group, largely because they advocate for violence against women, and their founder, Paul Elam, has openly defended grape culture. So I think we need to be careful about...
It's TikTok, so the grape means rape. Yeah, so basically, it was an editorial made by a guy who works for a hate group, and like a red pill hate group, that wrote an editorial trying to extrapolate an opinion-based, conclusion from a study that did not have that conclusion. And that's what she uses as her evidence twice.
How we represent this. It is not an independently peer-reviewed study.
By the way, this is why Destiny called her retarded.
Study or paper, but a blog article written by an MRA misogynist with ties to a hate group. Now, Rosenthal obtains the data that the Massachusetts study is based on, and it's important to point out here that that data set does not dispute anything that is in the Massachusetts study. When we look at fathers who ask for custody, they get sole or joint legal custody in 84% of cases. But Rosenthal is not happy with these numbers, so he fudges the math. He drops joint custody entirely from consideration and focuses only on sole custody, saying that when fathers seek custody, they get sole custody 45% of the time. But when mothers seek custody, they get sole custody 74% of the time. Which he then uses as the headline for his article, that mothers' requests for sole custody are granted 65% more than fathers' requests, or about 1 2/3. But as I've covered before, men self-report that their wives are 4 times more likely to be the primary caretaker of their children than they are. When we look at stay-at-home parents, again, mothers are 4 times more likely to be the stay-at-home primary caretaker of their children than fathers. And when we look at census data and custodial parents, again, mothers are 4 times more likely to be the custodial parent than fathers. But family courts are a...
Another thing that she argues against is the idea that by default, legal guardianship of a child should go to the mother. Now, at first glance, this sounds like a very reasonable position. Like, yeah, why should we see mothers as like the only fit parent by default? Why should we? The reason for this is, realistically, the mother is the only one that you can guarantee will be there for the child's birth. The mother has to carry the baby for 9 months, usually, and has to be there for its birth. Has to be there for the signing of the birth certificate and all that shit, right? Presuming it's in a hospital, right? The mother's going to be there. The mother is going to be present and is going to walk out of the hospital, generally, with the baby. That is why we, by default, allocate guardianship to the mother. If the father is there, and the father is present, and the mother is okay with it, then the father can be put on the birth certificate and can gain legal guardianship of the child, and there's no court issues, there's no problems. We're talking about situations here where there was a problem so severe that the custody disagreement went to court. Now, the funny thing is, another statistic that is pretty commonly tossed around that Lauren neglects is the fact that I think it's almost 60% of men who get awarded physical custody of their children after battling for it in court don't even use it. Hell, that's not even accounting for the amount of fathers ordered to pay child support that never do. The reason why men want to hear a woman talk about why family courts are so fucked is because they don't want to pay child support, and they don't like the idea of women being able to have no-fault divorce and potentially even be able to take half their shit if they've been married long enough that the woman has been provided for and wealth has been built between the two. Because that is when you have legal precedent to argue for a 50-50 split of finances between the couple. So yeah, it's just dudes who don't want to pay child support, and they don't want to feel as though women can have any recourse against them in the justice system when it comes to divorce and child custody. And this puts aside all the fact that tons of abusive fathers have won their children in court, the guardianship. Like, the comments are filled with people telling their stories of that in the comments of this video we're watching.
Assigning sole custody to mothers, not at 4 times, but not even at twice the rate of fathers, shows an incredible bias towards fathers. To put this another way, men who contest custody are twice as likely to walk out of court being the primary caretaker than they were walking in. Which then brings me to Lauren's next point.
Where the study still definitively concludes that mothers get sole physical custody 65% more often than dads, only to cherry pick the facts so that only your narrative is supported, then push this as some irrefutable nationwide fact.
Now, Lauren misspeaks here and means legal custody, not physical custody. But on her other point about cherry-picking a single data source, ignoring all else just to reaffirm your own narrative, it's important to remember that Rosenthal's article here doesn't dispute any of the claims that Massachusetts study makes. Not only that, but it only deals with one study. The Massachusetts report actually cites 5 studies in order to make its case. A study of law professionals that show that fathers get sole or joint physical custody 94% of the time. The Middlesex study that Rosenthal uses that shows that men get some form of legal custody 84% of the time. A second study from Middlesex County that shows that men get some form of legal custody 79% of the time.
The mother has to reach a very high standard in the vast majority of cases to prove the father is unfit to have any form of custody or visitation or guardianship of the child. It is a high standard that has to be met in the vast majority of cases. Some judges can maybe go off of their own instinct, and there can be some unusual cases, but for the most part, it's a pretty high standard of evidence that has to be met. Because the idea of just breaking a family apart legally, putting a legal mandate on how often you may have to see, say, an abusive partner, or maybe not ever have to see them, it's pretty serious. A lot of context and evidence has to be considered.
A study from LA County in California that shows that men get sole custody 63% of the time, as well as a nationwide study that shows that men get some form of custody in 51% of cases. Now, Lauren also says that the reason why Massachusetts does show a bias towards fathers is because of unique laws that it has in setting up default temporary custody orders for joint custody, and that no other state has these laws, which is why this trend isn't replicated in other states. But that's not correct. The Massachusetts study itself points to data from California and nationwide, which also shows this trend. But Massachusetts was not the only state to conduct a gender bias study, like Florida, for example. And what they found was not only a disturbing trend of fathers to contest custody, not for custody of the kids, but in order to gain an advantageous property settlement, but that when men did contest for custody, they were largely successful.
A lot of fathers contest for custody because it lets them get off a little easier, maybe even entirely, when it comes to child support payments. Burnout, absentee fathers fear child support payments more than anything in the world. So anything to try to keep a judge from ordering that, they'll do.
Successful. Next up, Maryland, where 85% of judges said that fathers get a fair and serious hearing, where they said that anti-father bias is more a reflection of social bias discouraging men from seeking custody than any evidence of a judicial bias, and that when men did overcome this and seek custody, they got a fair and serious hearing. Not only that, but courts were actively biased towards involved fathers and gave them greater deference. Meanwhile, mothers were unfairly punished if they wanted to work or if they had a new partner, and that all these factors gave men a greater advantage and bias in family custody cases. Now on to New York, which found the same biases as Maryland, where involved fathers were given greater deference, meanwhile mothers were punished for wanting to work or having new relationships. Which is why the Civic Research Institute, when they surveyed all of the literature on child custody, pointed out that overall, over 40 states and numerous district courts had commissioned studies into gender bias, and that these had found unanimously a pervasive bias against mothers. In fact, so pervasive was this bias that when Florida's task force was commissioned to start their study, they skipped the question of if gender bias exists, saying that this has already been well established. And when taken overall, these studies show that gender bias does sometimes affect men, but it is overwhelmingly and disproportionately disadvantaging women. And we can see this lack of bias against men in more recent studies, such as this 2007 study into the 21st District Court in South Carolina. And what they found was that fathers who contested for custody got either sole or joint physical custody almost 60% of the time. Across total cases, that was 31% for fathers, so it almost doubled. But even that 31% is in line with the data from other studies, such as this custody exchange survey of hundreds of law professionals across every state in the country, which showed that on average fathers get about 35% of custody time. Now, why is that 35% and not 50? Well, I covered that extensively in that video, but in summary, it's because men don't do 50% of the childcare before the custody hearing. And all of this is before we even talk about the numerous studies that show an even greater bias towards fathers when they are accused of violence or when they accuse the mothers of alienation. And there are scores of those studies. Now, Lauren's absolutely correct when she implies that using a single data point from a single study to form a narrative would be reckless. But the reason why we say that fathers who actively seek custody are often likely to get it is because there are multiple studies from multiple states across multiple decades that show this to be true. And yet here you are, Lauren, admitting that you are struggling to find any studies that show a pervasive bias against fathers and towards mothers.
There is none. The fact is, the whole family court thing, being like super biased against men or whatever, is a complete myth. Even I fell for it for many years. As a lefty, I fell for it. It's a complete myth. It is part of the fantasy pushed by MRAs and red pillars and conservatives to convince us that we've somehow had some miraculous pendulum switch in terms of the state of our society. Actually, it's the women who are more advantaged than men now. Black people have it better than white people. They're the privileged ones now. Immigrants are the more wealthy ones, taking everyone's jobs and housing from the native white people. I've heard that before, by the way. I'm not even joking. That's like word for word from a conservative figure. It's just the most batshit stuff that they'll say. It's a fantasy world to try to convince people that things have switched and now the most privileged groups in society are actually the most disprivileged groups. It's really pathetic. And you know what's sad? I fell for it. I'm like, you guys know me, right? Like, you guys know me. You guys know me, right? Like, granted, I was suspicious, and I figured out what was going on, and here I am, calling it out, but I fell for it, to be fair. I was watching a lot of her content. You can see there's a fair amount of, like, of watch there, because I was listening to her content on like, autoplay while grinding WoW. Her content is very, very appealing to the average Gen Z or even middle-aged, like, divorcee dude. And a lot of it is just meant to be this, like... so much of it is, like, hard to actually disagree with. There's a reason why I've specified these clips here, because most of her content is not this bad. Her content really isn't this bad most of the time. The problem is things like that show me where her heart is and all that. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I would love to have her on stream for a discussion. Like, I wouldn't be, like, mean or rude or anything like that. I'm not Destiny. I'm not gonna, like, call her mean names or anything. And I'd prefer to be able to, like, come to a conclusion that is her not being, like, a red pillar pick me or whatever. But, like, come on. There's definitely a lot of things here in her content that stand out as blaringly red flags in regards to this sort of era of content where women just kind of upload soft red pill stuff meant to kind of please men that are looking for validation of their preconceived notions and opinions and habits from a woman. Like, let me see if I can find a good example of the content that really blows up from her that that I don't really disagree with, right? That I think is going to have the best chance of getting people to believe that she's just a voice trying to be positive for men and women. Okay, here's a good example. Have you heard about the term ick? If you're a girl or a non-binary person, I want you to imagine you're a guy right now, okay? And you're just doing your own thing, and you're scrolling through TikTok, and you see one of these viral TikToks pop up about ick. Ick is things that guys do that turn girls off and make girls grossed out by them. Like, go from being attracted to them to instantly finding them revolting.
Visitation toward fit, active
Oh,
parents.
thank you, YouTube. Love that. Thanks for fast forwarding. All right, here's the TikToks about the ick.
New ick unleashed.
Healthy masculinity.
You know, it was only 4 years ago that only 5% of fathers reported ever changing a diaper, and you're mad that the father of your child is, hold on, let me check my notes, spending time with his daughter. Oh, but we're the ones who must not be fun at parties. But that's not the only way not being a deadbeat has charted the top of the ick list. Let's check out the others. And also can't do a cartwheel with their daughter.
So, these are, for those that don't know, these are wives posting these and talking about how they've been icked by their husbands. Like, this is a wife recording her husband and her daughter playing in the yard, and he does a cartwheel with his daughter, and she captioned it, "New ick unlocked," because she finds it, like, unattractive of her husband to do that. Aren't they joking? No. Guys, it's TikTok. It is the highest concentration of the worst people, okay? And that is very important for what we talk about here. It doesn't matter whether or not it's a skit, by the way, because most people who see it think it's real. When you're a guy and you see this, at least in my case, does it not make you just kind of want to, like, check out of dating, like, women and getting into the dating world at all? The idea that, like, there's this thing called an ick, and that the girl that you like or start dating could just suddenly become revolted by you doing some mundane thing. Something positive even like this, and you wouldn't even know it. She wouldn't even express how, like, disgusted by you she is now. Can you imagine how destructive that is to men's, like, mind? We talk so much about how, like, societal expectations for women affect them from a young age, affect their psychology. Can you imagine how much seeing shit like this affects young men? Like, the idea that, like, anything they do could be seen as revolting to women. When, let's be honest, men are only seen as valuable to society if they can provide wealth, protection, or sexual gratification to women at a large scale. That is the only time men are seen as anything close to valuable by society. So the idea that just doing a somersault with your future daughter in the yard could give your future wife the ick. Can you imagine how fucking psychologically destructive that is for young men? Seeing these TikToks virally going around on the website all day. Every day they see this shit. This battle of the sexes crap. Yeah, Gen Z dating is so fucked. That's what I'm talking about here. She's taking advantage. Like, her points here are so good. Her points here are fine. Like, she is completely correct here. Lauren is, Dadvocate. These are the videos that go viral and get a lot of views generally, and this is, like, what I discovered her from. Keep in mind, of course, the sketchy shit she's been up to when it comes to, like, the, family court stuff and other topics. But, like, this is the kind of stuff that goes viral and makes her look really good and hard to criticize. She seems like almost like a feminist who's just advocating for men. And maybe that is what she is, and she's just kind of missing on a few things and making some mistakes, but God, editing out his response in the way that she did feels so sus. Anyway, we'll watch the rest of this so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. Like, the type of, like, social anxiety and mental damage, for lack of a better term, that content creators like this take advantage of in young men, and what creates it, is primarily what I want to look at right now.
Ants do a cartwheel with their daughter. Tread water. Just drown. Ride bikes. Do the wave. Go bowling.
This is them on a date, I guess?
Or have sepsis.
That's gotta be a joke.
Yeah, I found this one. Could you barely not die?
That's gotta be a joke. I hope the one where it's new ick unlock having sepsis and it's the guy getting out of a hospital bed with crutches and like hobbling over to a bathroom. I hope that one's fake. But you know that most of the guys who are like teenagers that see it think it's real and think, wow, another demonic woman. If she doesn't stop playing this Rihanna song, I swear to God. It's not her. That's the music that the TikToks use. They use that clip from the Rihanna song in every one of them because that's how TikTok works with their trends. And they call it New Ick Unlocked and then show an image of a guy that they're in a relationship doing something that revolts them. Usually, like, and icks aren't like, an ick isn't something normal, by the way. Ick talks, thank you. That's what they're called. An ick isn't something normal. Like, let's say a guy has, like, a criminal record, you know? That is not an ick. An ick is specifically something completely normal and mundane that apparently disgusts women. I didn't even know this was supposed to be a thing. Like, apparently women have icks. Like, the idea of women having icks is, like, terrifying to most Gen Z dudes, right? And this is just one example of many that I think kind of, like, primes a lot of dudes in this age demographic to feel as though they're under attack in some way.
Die in a way that's a little bit more...
Less so that they're under attack, but more so that they're hopeless. And the fact that they've decided to resign themselves to that hopelessness has been what's made them under attack. How many times have you seen these guys claim that because they aren't gonna date women, women are gonna get mad at them? Like, because they're abstaining from the dating world, women will be upset with them about it. Like, they'll claim that's what's gonna happen. How many times have you seen it? I have. Let's see how these women act whenever I refuse to date them and they're 40 years old and they've got 30 cats and their ovaries are drying up. How many times have you heard that shit? For me, it's too many damn times.
More masculine, please. Ladies, the problem with this trend...
Poor hygiene is not an ick. Once again, icks are not things that are reasonable deal breakers. The idea of an ick is that it's a completely normal thing that you would do without even realizing it, that has made the girl that you're in a relationship with disgusted by you. The idea of the ick is that you have permanently made her unable to find you attractive ever again by doing that thing. Really toxic. Like, putting that idea into young men's heads that they could, like, laugh a certain way and that's going to be a girl's ick, that they're in a relationship. God forbid that could be their future wife, and that they could give the ick and their marriage is done and they would never know what that ick is. Or just the knowledge that women have these things almost feels like fuel towards a misogyny fire. Like, how dare women think so little of me for doing a somersault with my daughter? Like, how could, like, young teenage boys not think that when seeing those videos of toxic-ass women putting down men? How could these young men's response not be to want to put down those women at least? And that type of anxiety and like, anger builds up and gets taken advantage of by the Andrew Tates of the world.
And is very simple. First of all, you would be falling down the wall, throwing up, sobbing on the floor if someone recorded a video of your legs underwater just to upload it to call them weird or gross. But
True.
Second and most importantly, how are we as women going to tell men to stop perpetuating the patriarchy? The patriarchy being an oppressive system that forces men to never show weakness and women to remain quiet and pure, then create an entire trend where we demean and humiliate men based off of any tiny thing that could even remotely be perceived as weak or feminine. So you're telling me that we've struggled for years with men feeling they're better off working overtime than at home doing cartwheels with our daughter, but we condemn him when he does. We struggle with getting men to come up with exciting new dates, but when he takes us swimming or cycling, we condemn him for not doing it manly enough.
So this is another thing that stood out to me, is every time she'd call out, like, a specific woman, she'd then go on to say, hey, this is a thing that all women do. Like, she'd be like, why do we women get upset at men when they blank and blank and blank? It's like, this was one video and, like, a dozen TikTok video. Why are you talking about it like this is some epidemic among women, that they freak out over men not folding the decorative towels well enough or whatever? Most relationship, like, fallouts are not happening over the decorative towels being folded the wrong way. They're happening over money and abuse and cheating and infidelity and people realizing maybe they got in a relationship before they knew who the person they were in a relationship with really was. This her pretending like most, like, women are fighting with their husbands over entirely mundane shit is very, very fantasy world. It's very much like trying to appease the I hate my wife humor kind of guys, you know? If it is true that she's, like, some kind of covert red pillar trying to grift money, then I think this is really insidious and dangerous, but I really don't want her to be. She has some good content and has some pretty damn good takes, and I think she does good stuff most of the time. It's just she's done some stuff that really feels weird to me. It just it feels almost like on intentional dishonesty is the only explanation. I would love to have a combo with her. If you guys can somehow make that happen, because that's what you guys have to do. I can't just, like, make that happen magically. You guys got to make it happen. Then I'd love to see it. Maybe she'll respond to me. Who knows? That could be a cool arc. The Dadvocate Xanderhall response video back and forth. That could be crazy. I don't know. But I would like to actually talk this out, like, one-on-one on stream. I think that'd be nice. That said, though, that's pretty much all I have to say on it.